My name is Matthew Winslow, 28 years old, an automotive design engineer working for a small company in downtown Detroit. The job is stable, but my life is not. I live alone, in a cramped room with pale gray walls and simple furnishings, a bed, a desk cluttered with papers, and a small kitchen that I rarely use. Loneliness, yes, that's the most accurate word to describe me right now. 4 years ago, my father, Malcolm Winslow, passed away in a horrific fire at the warehouse of Winslow Logistics, the family logistics company he had built from scratch with his own 2 hands. That shock still haunts me like a wound that has never fully healed. Every night, sleep becomes my enemy. I lie awake in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling stained with watermarks from rain. Images of my father keep flashing back, so vivid that they make my heart clench. I see him being swallowed by the raging red flames, cries for help echoing in my mind even though I wasn't there. "Dad," I whisper in the darkness, tears rolling down my cheeks without me realizing it. 4 years have passed, a long enough time for people to forget the pain, but for me, it only makes the loss sink deeper with time. I still keep the old phone by my bedside, an ancient Nokia that I used to use to answer my father's calls every morning. In the contacts, his number is still there, simply labeled Dad. I can't bring myself to delete it, even though I know the number has been disconnected for a long time, ever since the police confirmed he died in the fire. Deep down, I still harbor a foolish hope that one day my phone might ring with a call from my father. That night, the clock struck exactly 2 a.m. I was drifting between wakefulness and dreams, my body exhausted after a long day buried in engine design blueprints. The wind outside the window whistled steadily, mixed with the patter of snow falling on the roof. Suddenly the phone vibrated, the familiar ringtone, the simple melody my father had once set, echoing through the pitch-black room. I jolted upright, my heart pounding like a drum. The screen lit up, and I froze when I saw the name displayed, Dad. It couldn't be. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was dreaming, or maybe it was some network glitch. But no, the phone was really vibrating, the screen flashing clearly, and I could feel each vibration in my hand. It was a real incoming call, not an illusion. Fear flooded me like a raging wave. My heart raced so fast that I could hear it echoing in my ears. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, my thumb sliding over the screen but not daring to press answer. "This can't be real," I told myself, my voice whispering shakily. My father's number hadn't been in use for 4 years, since the fire was concluded. A charred body was found and the police identified it based on the silver watch, a gift I gave him for his 50th birthday. He was dead, everyone said so. So who was calling? A cruel prank? Or... No, I didn't dare think further. The mix of confusion and horror paralyzed me. I sat there, staring at the screen, cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. The call went on, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, then automatically ended. The ringtone stopped, leaving the room in a heavier silence than ever before. I gasped for breath, trying to regain my composure. Opening the call history, I saw it clearly. One missed call from Dad. A real number, a real signal, not fake or a software error. I tried calling back immediately, my finger pressing hard on the call button as if trying to prove it was just an illusion. But the mechanical voice responded, "The subscriber you are calling is currently unavailable." My heart sank, a wave of bewilderment spreading through my body. This wasn't a dream nor a joke. Someone, or something, had called me from my father's number. I turned on the bedside lamp, the room lighting up dimly, and began rummaging through the drawer by the bed. There, I still kept an old file about the fire, printed newspaper clippings, police reports, and a few photos. I opened it, my hands shaking as I flipped through. The image of the scorched silver watch appeared, its face distorted but still clearly engraved with Malcolm Winslow. That was the only evidence, they said. But now, looking at it under the yellowish light, a vague doubt began to stir in my mind, like a faint ray of light piercing through the darkness. Was that body really my father's? The question lingered, keeping me from closing my eyes any longer. I sat there in the cold room, holding the watch in the photo with trembling hands, as if it were whispering a secret buried for too long. The clock showed 3 a.m. Then 4 a.m. Then dawn began to break through the snow-covered window curtains. I couldn't sleep at all, just lay awake, my mind swirling with chaotic images. Last night's call was like a time bomb, awakening everything I had tried to bury deep in my heart. I got up, brewed a strong black coffee, trying to shake off the fatigue, but my hand still shook as I held the cup. Outside, Detroit was waking up, the sounds of traffic beginning to echo. But to me, the world outside seemed so distant. Morning arrived, and I dragged myself to the office like a soulless corpse. My job is designing cars, sitting in front of a computer screen sketching engines and lines, but today everything was blurry. I stared at the drawing, but my mind was elsewhere. Colleagues asked, "Matthew, are you okay? You look like you haven't slept in a week." I forced a smile, nodded. "Yeah, it's just, the wind was too strong last night." But I knew it wasn't the wind, it was that call. All the memories of the fire from 4 years ago came back clearer than ever, like an old film being rewound, so vivid that it made my heart clench. I couldn't concentrate, my hand holding the mouse was trembling, and I had to erase and redraw a simple line 3 times. The boss called me into his office, checked on me, but I just shook my head and asked for half the day off. "You need to rest," he said, and I nodded, grateful that I didn't have to explain. On the way home, I stopped at a familiar coffee shop, sat in a hidden corner watching the bustling people outside. But my head was still swirling with the past. I remember that fateful night like it was yesterday, the night of October 28th, 4 years ago. At that time, I was in my old apartment getting ready for bed after a long, tiring day. The phone rang at midnight. Elena, my stepmother's voice trembling on the other end. "Matthew, the warehouse is on fire. Your father. He's in there." My heart seemed to stop beating. I rushed out of the house, driving like a madman through the dark streets of Detroit, the cold wind whipping my face through the wide open window. When I arrived, a horrific scene unfolded before my eyes. My father's main warehouse, Winslow Logistics, was engulfed in fierce flames, the red fire raging high into the sky, swallowing everything. Explosions rang out continuously from the chemical drums and flammable materials inside, black smoke billowing up, covering the entire night sky. The firefighters arrived right after, hoses spraying water relentlessly, but the fire spread terrifyingly fast, like an uncontrollable monster. I stood there behind the police barrier, tears streaming down my face without me realizing it, muttering, "Dad, where are you?" It took the firefighters hours to extinguish the fire, and when dawn broke, all that remained was a blackened pile of ashes, twisted metal scraps, and a pungent, acrid smell. They dug through the rubble and found several charred bodies, so deformed that they couldn't be identified by sight alone. Among them, one body stood out because it was still wearing the familiar silver watch on its scorched wrist. I remember it clearly, that watch, the gift I personally selected and engraved for my father's 50th birthday. Malcolm Winslow. The inscription was still readable even though the glass face was shattered and the metal blackened. The police concluded immediately. The victim was Malcolm Winslow based on the watch and matching personal records. They said he was probably checking inventory late, a habit of my father's, and an electrical accident had caused the fire. I collapsed right at the scene when I heard the news, Elena hugging me and sobbing, but at that moment I only felt the world crumbling. My father, the strong man, always my pillar, had gone like that in the merciless flames. What happened after the incident was even worse. The news spread across Detroit like a storm. Businessman Malcolm Winslow dies in suspected electrical fire. The press made a big fuss with images of the charred warehouse on the front pages, interviews with employees and neighbors. Winslow Logistics, the empire my father built from scratch, specializing in shipping goods across Lake Michigan, suddenly plunged into chaos. Elena, my father's second wife, stepped up to take over all management rights and inheritance assets. She said to me, her voice full of sympathy, "Matthew, you're too young, not ready to shoulder this. Let me handle it." At that time, I was 24, just graduated from college, learning the ropes at the company. But the pain of losing my father left me with no strength to argue otherwise. She took control of everything, from paperwork to bank accounts. My father's company was paid millions in insurance, a huge sum, enough for Elena to restart operations in just 6 months. I remember the early meetings, her sitting in the chairman's seat, her voice cold and decisive, completely different from the fragility when she cried at my father's grave. Public opinion praised her as a resilient woman, but in me, a vague unease began to creep in. My mindset back then was utterly chaotic. I accepted everything as an unchangeable fact, because how could you change death? The pain of losing my father left me completely disoriented, like being lost in a dark forest. I stayed up all night dreaming of my father calling my name from within the flames, waking up with my pillow soaked in tears. I left the company not wanting to see the familiar hallways where my father once walked, not wanting to hear the pitying whispers from employees. I moved out to live alone in this small apartment, working as an ordinary technical employee, burying myself in drawings to forget. But deep down, I was still tormented terribly for not being able to save my father. Why wasn't I there that night? Why didn't I call him earlier? And especially, there was a sense of incompleteness, like a missing piece in the puzzle. The fire happened too quickly, too unexpectedly, and hard to explain. The warehouse was designed with excellent fire prevention measures, automatic sprinkler systems, fire doors, smoke detectors. My father was always proud of that. Why did it spread so fast? Now, as I reopen the fire file, I notice a small detail that was overlooked, one that 4 years ago in my grief I didn't pay attention to. The time the fire broke out, according to the report, was 23:42, but nearby traffic cameras, a short video clip attached by the police, had recorded Elena's license plate leaving the warehouse area at 23:30, just 12 minutes before the explosion. My heart beat faster. What was Elena doing there so late? She told me she was at home waiting for my father to come back for a late dinner. But the video was clear. Her silver Mercedes, the familiar license plate, speeding through the intersection under the dim streetlights. I paused the frame, zoomed in close, and it was definitely her. Why didn't she mention it? And why leave just 10 minutes before everything erupted? I slumped into the chair, my mind reeling. I remembered that my father had suspected issues within the company. About a week before the fire, he called me into his office, his voice thoughtful. "Matthew, something's not right here. Some strange invoices, but anyway, let me check first." He laughed it off, patted my shoulder, but his eyes showed worry. At the time, I thought it was just work pressure, but now, everything started connecting. From there, all the memories of that fateful night began turning into questions, like scattered puzzle pieces gradually forming a terrifying picture. Did my father really die in the fire? Or did someone set it up? Elena, she benefited the most, with control of the company and the insurance money. I shook my head, trying to dispel the thought, but it clung to me. I stood up, pacing the room, my heart pounding. Outside, snow was falling again, but inside me a storm was brewing. After 2 sleepless nights, I couldn't endure it any longer. I decided I had to do something, had to check the call data again. I opened my phone, went into the history, and copied the incoming number. As an engineer, I'm familiar with using a technical tracking app, a specialized software for monitoring GPS signals and cell towers, often used in my work designing autonomous vehicle systems. I entered the number, combining it with the area code from the call history. The screen loaded slowly, my heart pounding. Then the result appeared. The location of the cell tower for that night's call was in a desolate area near Lake Michigan, about 60 miles from downtown Detroit. A remote place, dense forest, sparse population, according to the map, only a few old cabins and hunting trails. I zoomed in and saw a vague address, a point near the lakeshore hidden among pine forests. Could it be a coincidence? Or was someone there using my father's number to call me? Fear flooded me, but mixed with it was a strong intuition, like an inner voice urging, "Go, Matt. The truth is there." I didn't wait for dawn. Right away I prepared. I rummaged through the wardrobe, grabbing a thick jacket, a wool hat, and a powerful flashlight. I stuffed the old phone into my pocket along with the silver watch. No, not the real one, but the printed photo from the file, yet I still carried it like a talisman. The fire file was crammed into my backpack, along with some water and snacks. My car is an old Ford, but reliable. I checked the gas, wiped the snow-covered windshield, and set off at 4 a.m. On the highway, the east wind whistled through the windows, snow flurrying lightly. I was both terrified. What if I encountered danger? A stranger, or worse, a conspiracy, and driven by an intuition I couldn't ignore. This was my only chance to find answers. The radio broadcast the weather report. Light storm from Lake Michigan, warning of slippery roads. I turned it off, focusing on the GPS. It was early winter, the sky covered in thick fog like a gray blanket shrouding everything. The forests on both sides of the road were bare, branches stark and reaching out like bony hands. The road to the lake area was winding and isolated, almost uninhabited. Only occasionally an old truck passing in the opposite direction, its headlights glaring through the mist. I drove slowly, gripping the steering wheel tightly, my heart pounding with every jolt on the rough road. The GPS led me off the highway onto a red dirt trail, muddy from melting snow. Destination 5 miles away, the mechanical voice announced. The atmosphere grew heavier, the wind from Lake Michigan blowing strongly, carrying the smell of salty water and rotting leaves. I imagined my father here in hiding, and the thought made my eyes sting with tears. But then fear crept in. What if this was a trap? Finally, the GPS pinpointed it, an old wooden cabin hidden among towering pines and dense reeds along the lake. I parked the car 100 meters away, turned off the headlights, and observed. The cabin looked like it was from the last century. Wooden walls scorched in places as if licked by fire, a rotting roof covered in moss. Everything had an ashen, time-worn hue like an unhealed wound slowly oozing blood. No cars, no lights, just the wind whistling through the door cracks and the distant sound of lake waves crashing. My heart raced wildly, my hand trembling as I held the flashlight. I stepped out of the car, the biting cold seeping through my jacket, giving me goosebumps all over. Intuition urged, "Go in." I approached, my footsteps light on the crunching dry leaves. The cabin door was ajar, unlocked as if inviting me. I pushed it gently, the door creaking open, and a gust of cold air hit my face. Inside was pitch black, dust thick on the rotting wooden floor, the air damp and musty, making me cough. I turned on the flashlight, sweeping it around. A simple room, an old wooden table, broken chairs, and a small stove in the corner. But then I noticed signs that someone had lived here recently. On the table, a coffee cup with residue still in it, not fully dry, perhaps from a few days ago. In the kitchen, a few packaged food boxes, dry bread, and an unopened soda can. On the floor, a few local newspapers from last month, headlines about Lake Michigan weather. My heart beat faster. Someone had been here and hadn't left long ago, not a ghost, but a real person. Then the flashlight beam swept to the table in the middle of the room. An old phone, identical to my father's, the battery removed and lying beside it, no SIM card. My hand trembled as I picked it up, inserted the battery, and turned it on. The screen lit up slowly, no password. I went into the call history and froze. Only one call had been made at exactly 2 a.m. that night, matching the time I received it. No contacts, no messages, just one outgoing number. Mine. My heart seemed to stop. This was the phone that had called me. Someone here had used it to contact me, then left it behind like a clue. Fear and hope mixed in me like a raging wave. I slumped into the chair, gasping for breath. Everything here evoked my father, the smell of old wood like the Winslow warehouse, the newspapers he used to read. But no clear traces. No clothes, no personal papers, just pieces of evidence seemingly left intentionally to guide me. I began to believe my father had been here, living in seclusion, and wanted me to find out. But why? And where was he now? I swept the flashlight everywhere, rummaging through the desk drawers with faint hope. And then, in the bottom drawer, I discovered a small folded piece of paper, its edges scorched as if from an old fire. I opened it, my hands shaking. Familiar handwriting, slightly trembling, identical to my father's. A short line, almost like a password or code. KM4Y127. KM might be an abbreviation for what? 4Y? 4 years? 127, a room number or some code? I didn't understand the meaning yet, but intuition told me it was related to the Fire or Winslow Company. I took a photo of the paper, stuffed it into my pocket, my heart pounding. This was a signal, I was sure. My father, if it was him, was leading me further. As I left the cabin, the sky suddenly poured down icy rain, heavy drops pounding the rotting wooden roof like drumming. I ran to the car, drenched, but in my heart, a belief was forming. Someone. Perhaps your own father is leaving signals in the ashes of the past, leading you to the truth. I drove back to Detroit in the rain and wind, my mind chaotic but more determined than ever. That string of characters would be the next key, and I wouldn't stop. The drive home stretched endlessly, rain lashing the windshield like leather whips, blurring my vision. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white from cold and tension. Rain pattered on the car roof, blending with the static radio broadcasting the weather report, but I heard nothing. My mind spun with that scorched piece of paper, KM-4Y-127. What could KM stand for? Kent, Michigan, or someone's initials? 4Y, 4 years, exactly the time since the fire. 127, a room number, a lock code, or an address? Intuition told me this was no coincidence. It was connected to my father, to Winslow Logistics. I drove through slippery highways, headlights from oncoming cars startling me several times. I reached Detroit in the late afternoon, the city already lit up, but the rain hadn't stopped, turning the streets into muddy rivers. I parked in front of the apartment, dashed inside, my jacket dripping water. The tiny room now looked like a battlefield. Fire files spread across the table, the computer screen glowing, and that paper sitting prominently beside it. I took off my wet jacket, brewed a steaming cup of coffee, trying to calm down. Over the past 4 years, I'd left Winslow Logistics, but I still had access to the old data system. An engineer's account Elena had never deleted, perhaps thinking I was harmless. I opened my laptop, logged in via VPN to avoid detection, my heart pounding. The system was slow, but eventually I accessed the old data repository. Warehouse lists, inventory codes, shipping history. I typed KM-4Y-127 into the search bar, my fingers trembling as I hit enter. The screen loaded for a few seconds, then the result appeared. It matched the code for an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Detroit, an old facility the company once used for surplus storage. Warehouse 127 KM Sector, short for North Michigan Zone. My heart leaped into my throat. This warehouse had been abandoned for years not far from the main one. Why had my father, if it was him, left this code, an invitation, or a trap? I couldn't wait. Despite the darkness and ongoing rain, I decided to go immediately. Packing my backpack with a flashlight, phone, and files, I drove through the pitch-black streets toward the suburbs. The roads were deserted, only dim streetlights illuminating puddles. The abandoned warehouse sat in an old industrial area surrounded by rusty iron fencing overgrown with weeds. I parked a distance away, turned off the headlights, and observed. No cars, no lights, just the rain pattering on the corrugated metal roof. My heart pounded, fear mixed with excitement. What am I doing? I asked myself, but my feet kept moving forward. I cut the fence with small pliers from the trunk, an old engineering tool, and slipped inside. Inside the warehouse was pitch black, the air damp and musty, the smell of dust and rust hitting my nose. I turned on the flashlight, sweeping it around. Empty shelves, rotting cardboard boxes, and cracked concrete floors. But then I noticed signs of recent activity. In one corner, a makeshift bed of canvas and wooden crates next to a homemade heater still warm with ashes. Someone had lit a fire not long ago. On a makeshift wooden table, a few canned foods, water bottles, and an old newspaper. My heart beat faster. It wasn't completely abandoned. Someone was living here, in hiding. I ventured deeper, the flashlight cutting through the darkness when suddenly a small sound echoed. Limping footsteps on the floor. I whipped around, my heart stopping. From the shadows, a figure emerged slowly. A limping gait, as if injured in one leg, shoulders tilted to one side, and when the flashlight beam hit the face, I froze. Those eyes, the familiar blue eyes, now etched with deep lines of time and exhaustion. Malcolm Winslow, my father, whom I thought had died 4 years ago. He was thinner, hair snow-white, beard unkempt, but it was him, no doubt. "Dad," I whispered, voice choking, the flashlight dropping and rolling on the floor. We stood there a few meters apart in the dark warehouse with only the sound of rain on the tin roof. My father looked at me, eyes glistening with tears, then stepped forward and hugged me tightly. Father and son reunited in an indescribable state, overflowing happiness like reclaiming a lost part of the soul, mingled with profound pain from the years apart and accumulated grief. I hugged him, tears streaming down, body trembling. "Dad, you're alive," I repeated, voice breaking. He patted my back, voice hoarse. "Matt, my boy. I'm sorry." We sat on the floor, leaning against an old shelf, rain still pattering like a fateful drum. That happiness was fragile, laced with pain. 4 years I'd lived in the agony of losing him, and now he was here, alive and breathing. But why? Questions surged, but in that moment I just wanted to hold him forever. My father began to speak, voice slow, eyes staring into the darkness. He recounted that fateful night, October 28th, 4 years ago. He was in the main warehouse checking technical documents. A shipment of strange chemicals he suspected had issues. He was talking with Rick Hayes, the loyal warehouse manager from the very beginning. Rick admired his silver watch and asked to try it on. "Just for a moment, boss," Rick said with a laugh. As soon as he put it on, they heard an explosion from the corner of the warehouse. A massive blast, then flames spreading terrifyingly fast, engulfing everything. Black smoke billowed, temperature soared. Rick pushed him toward the emergency exit. "Run, boss. I'll hold them off." He tried to pull Rick along, but the fire separated them. Rick sacrificed himself to save him, blocking the door with his body, allowing my father to escape through an underground tunnel few people knew about. He ran outside, injured in the leg, and hid in the nearby forest, watching the firefighters arrive. I listened, heart-wrenching. "So the body, it was Rick?" I asked, voice trembling. My father nodded, eyes red. Over the past 4 years, he had lived in hiding, moving from cabin to cabin, waiting for a chance to return. He knew the warehouse fire wasn't a random accident, but deliberately set, flammable chemicals misplaced, and he suspected internal sabotage. My father heard the news announce his death. They mistook Rick's body for his because of the watch. He seized the opportunity, letting everyone believe he was dead while secretly investigating. He used old contacts, monitored company finances, gathered information. "I couldn't reveal myself right away, Matt. They would kill me for real," he said, voice full of pain. I was stunned, faith, grief, and anger blending into a storm. The belief that he was alive was now reality, but the pain of the past 4 years tore open and rage surged toward whoever caused it all. "Dad, why reveal yourself now? And why did you disappear from the wooden cabin?" I asked, voice rising, tears flowing. My father looked at me, gripping my hand tightly. He explained he was being pursued, nearly discovered several times, strangers tailing the cabin. He had to keep moving from Lake Michigan to abandoned warehouses like this. "I called you from the cabin but didn't dare speak, afraid of being monitored. I left the code for you to find me here." He reached into his pocket, handed me a tiny USB drive, voice lowering. "The truth isn't fully clear yet, but it's time to seek justice." I took the USB, hands shaking. What was inside? Evidence about Elena? About the fire? We sat there, rain still falling, and I felt the weight of the truth. My father was alive, but the journey was just beginning. Anger toward Elena rose high. Did she know? Or was she the one? I hugged him tighter, happiness mixed with fear. We had to act, but for now, this was enough. We sat like that for a long while, saying nothing, just listening to the rain and each other's frantic heartbeats. My father stroked my hair the way he used to when I was little, his voice hoarse. Matt, we have to be careful. They're still hunting me. I nodded, wiped my tears, and decided to act immediately. I couldn't leave him here any longer. This warehouse was too exposed, too close to the city. I thought of an old friend's apartment on the outskirts of Detroit, a secluded place I'd once sublet when changing jobs. He was away on a long business trip and I still had the spare key. Dad, I'll take you somewhere safe, I whispered, helping him stand. His leg still limped from the old fire injury, making my heart ache. We left the warehouse under the pouring rain. I supported him to the car, holding an umbrella over him. On the drive, rain lashed the windshield, streetlights dimly reflected in the puddles, and I drove slowly to avoid prying eyes. Dad sat beside me, staring out the window, recounting in fragments his years in hiding. Scant meals, constant movement, always on guard. I listened, my heart full of sorrow, blaming myself for not suspecting sooner. The apartment was in a quiet residential area about 20 miles from downtown Detroit, shielded by trees and with no security cameras. I parked in the back garage, helped Dad in through the rear door. Inside was simple but cozy. A small kitchen, an old sofa, and a bedroom with thick curtains. I checked the fridge, still some food, then brewed him hot tea. It's safe here, Dad. No one knows. I'll bring food and medicine regularly. He nodded, sinking into the sofa, exhaustion etched deep on his face. Thank you, Matt. But don't come too often. They might be watching. We hugged again before I left, and in that embrace I clearly felt his frailty and the fear he didn't voice. By the time I got home, the clock was nearing midnight. The rain had just stopped, but the cold still seeped everywhere. I locked the door tight, drew the curtains, and sat at my desk. The USB lay there, tiny but seemingly holding something that could change everything. My heart pounded as I plugged it into the computer. The screen lit up and I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of files, copied emails, bank statements, audio recordings, and photos of documents. I clicked the first file, a chain of emails between Elena and an unknown address, likely a stranger. The content froze me. She discussed resolving the Malcolm problem, with details about flammable chemicals placed in the warehouse. Another email, hire a professional, ensure no trace. Big fire, no survivors. My heart clenched. The horrific crime of my stepmother and her son Alex was the mastermind. They had hired someone to set the warehouse ablaze to kill Malcolm, seize the company, and claim the insurance. Alex was involved, sending a confirmation email. Mom, the plan's solid. The watch will be perfect evidence. The watch, my gift, was used to cover it up. Trembling, I opened an audio file, Elena's cold voice speaking to someone. He has to die. The company is mine. Then more recent files. When she learned my father was alive, perhaps through rumors or surveillance, she continued hiring people to hunt him down. Photos of contracts with hitmen, addresses of cabins Dad had stayed in. She knew he was alive and wouldn't stop. Rage surged through me like fire, my hand clenching the mouse. For 4 years I'd lived in misery while she lived luxuriously on what my father had built. I stood, pacing the room, angry tears streaming. How could she? I whispered, punching the wall until my knuckles bled. The next morning I didn't go to the office. I called in sick. My mind spun with the evidence, but I knew I couldn't act alone. I needed an expert. I thought of Jake, my college friend, now a lawyer at a small firm downtown Detroit. We'd been close, and he specialized in criminal law. I called him, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake, I need to meet you urgently. It's big. He agreed to meet at our usual coffee shop, a crowded place to avoid attention. On the way, I kept checking the rearview mirror, afraid of being followed. The cafe was warm, coffee aroma filling the air, but my heart stayed ice cold. Jake was waiting, tall with glasses, smiling warmly. "Matt, you look like a ghost. What's wrong?" I told him everything from the midnight call to reuniting with Dad, then handed him the USB. Jake listened, his face growing serious, then opened his laptop to review the files. His eyes widened. "My God, Matt, this is irrefutable evidence. Emails, recordings, proof of intent to murder, arson, insurance fraud." But then he shook his head, voice low. "The evidence is strong, but not enough to definitively charge your stepmother. Emails from anonymous addresses could be dismissed as forgeries. The recordings clearly have her voice, but need technical authentication. And the link to Alex, her son, is weak, just a few indirect emails. To prosecute for murder, asset seizure, and will forgery, we need more direct evidence. Witness testimony or undeniable financial proof." I slumped in my chair, disappointment surging. "So what now, Jake?" My dad's in hiding, his life hanging by a thread. Jake patted my shoulder. "We need to gather more. Maybe dig into internal sources or track finances. But be careful, Matt. This is major crime. Your stepmother and half-brother are very dangerous." We needed to discuss further. Jake promised to help pro bono, and I left the cafe with a flicker of hope but a heart full of worry. Back at Dad's place, I brought food and medicine. He was reading an old newspaper, looking slightly better. I told him everything about the USB and meeting Jake, voice trembling. Dad listened, eyes darkening. I suspected Elena for a long time, but never thought she'd go this far. Alex, the boy's being manipulated by her. We sat at the small kitchen table, rain falling outside the window again, planning how to collect and complete the evidence. We need enough to prosecute Elena and Alex for murder, asset seizure, and forging the will, I said, voice determined. Dad nodded. The will, she altered it to cut you out. I have the original hidden somewhere. We mapped out a detailed plan. Track finances through old bank contacts, find witnesses like former hired hands, but the key was direct information. Alex, Dad said, eyes lighting up. He's not entirely bad. He's under his mother's thumb. If you approach him, act friendly, he might spill. The plan was to extract information through Alex, Elena's son from a previous marriage. Alex was now 26, vice president at Winslow Logistics, a tall, ambitious guy, but I remembered he lacked backbone. We'd played together as kids, though never close. I'll set up a meeting with my half-brother, pretend I want back in the company, then subtly ask about the fire, I said. Dad nodded. Be careful, Matt. Don't reveal anything. And remember, justice isn't revenge. We need the truth. We hugged. I left with the plan in my head. On the drive home, the rain stopped, but the storm in my heart still raged. Alex, the final key. But if he knew, would he betray his mother? Or turn on us? Tension rose. I drove faster, ready for the next step. The path to justice was nearing, but so was danger. I got home, lay awake, rehearsing the plan. Tomorrow morning, I'd call Alex, pretend I wanted to meet to reminisce. My heart pounded, fear mixed with resolve. The evidence wasn't enough yet, but we'd make it enough. Elena would pay, and my father would return. For real. That night stretched endlessly, like an unending nightmare. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the mottled ceiling, my mind swirling with chaotic images. The USB with its cold emails, Elena's voice in the recording, and my father's face, gaunt, weary, yet full of resolve. I imagined the meeting with Alex. We weren't very close. He was Elena's son from her previous marriage. I began to worry. What if he refuses, or worse, tells Elena? The thought made my heart clench, but there was no other choice. Jake said we needed direct testimony, and Alex was the key. Dawn crept through the curtains, bringing the weak winter sunlight of Detroit. I sat up, hands trembling as I picked up the phone and took a deep breath. That morning, I called Alex from a burner SIM I'd bought at a convenience store to avoid tracking. His voice came through, polite but wary. "Hello, who's this?" I swallowed hard, trying to sound calm. "Alex, it's Matt. Matthew Winslow." A few seconds of silence, then he sighed. "Matt? Wow, it's been a while. Why are you calling from a strange number?" I forced a laugh, pretending friendliness. "Oh, my old phone broke using a temp. Listen, I want to meet up and reminisce. About the company. I'm thinking of coming back to Winslow Logistics, but need your advice." More silence, then he agreed, voice slightly hesitant. "Yeah, sure. This afternoon at the old cafe on Main Street? 3 o'clock. I agreed, hung up, my heart pounding like a drum. The plan had begun. I messaged Dad via the encrypted app we used. "Meeting Alex this afternoon." "Stay put, Dad," he replied briefly. "Be careful, son." On the way to the cafe, I kept checking the rearview mirror, afraid of being followed. Detroit that afternoon was gray, the east wind whistling through the streets, dry leaves swirling underfoot. The familiar cafe where Dad used to take us for breakfast years ago was now crowded with office workers. I chose a secluded corner table, ordered a strong black coffee, and waited. My heart raced, hands gripping the cup until my knuckles went white. Alex arrived on time, dressed in a neat suit, a polite smile on his lips. He gave me a light hug and sat down. "Matt, you look different. 4 years, huh?" I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Yeah, life. And you, Vice President, sounds impressive." We made small talk about the company, Detroit's economy, but I sensed tension in him. His eyes avoided mine, fingers twisting the coffee spoon. Then I steered toward the main topic, voice lowering. "Alex, I called you because of Dad's accident. These 4 years, I've been haunted. That fire. What do you think? Was it really an accident?" Alex froze, face paling, eyes turning to the window where rain began to drizzle. "Accident. Yeah, that's what the news said." But his voice trembled, and I clearly saw the conflict in his eyes. I pressed gently. "I found some strange things. Chemical invoices, and Elena was at the warehouse before the fire." Alex stared at me, face ashen. What do you know?" I briefly mentioned the call, the cabin, but hid that Dad was alive. Alex sat silent, then suddenly bowed his head, voice choking. "Matt, these 4 years, I've been living in hell. Torn inside, no peaceful night." He confessed, voice shaking, tears rolling down. Alex admitted Elena's crimes. She had planned it long ago out of greed and jealousy toward Dad. My mom, she hired someone to place the chemicals, cause the explosion. She wanted the company, the insurance money. I knew, but was forced to join. I sent the confirmation email, but Matt, I didn't want this. She said it was just a scare, never expected death. I sat frozen, rage surging but holding it back. "And the will? She forged it, right?" Alex nodded. "Yeah, she altered it to cut you out. I have the original hidden at home." The cafe air suddenly grew heavy. The coffee grinder's noise echoed like an explosion in my head. Alex sobbed, shoulders shaking. "I regret it, Matt. These 4 years I've seen Dad's ghost everywhere, like a curse." At that moment, the cafe door opened. A figure stepped in from the rain. I startled. It was Dad, wrapped in a thick coat, hat pulled low over his face. He had followed me here despite my warning. Dad approached the table, voice hoarse. "Alex." Alex jerked his head up, face deathly pale, eyes wide in horror. "Dad, Uncle Malcolm." He stood abruptly, chair clattering, drawing glances from nearby tables. Dad sat down, gripping Alex's shoulder firmly. "Yes, I'm alive." Alex collapsed back into his seat, stunned, stammering, "Impossible. You died. The fire." Dad briefly recounted that night, Rick's sacrifice, and how he escaped. Then he looked Alex straight in the eye. "These 4 years I've been hiding, living in fear because Elena knows I'm alive. She hired people to hunt me from cabin to cabin. I've been running like prey, Alex. Alexx sat there, face chalk white, hand over his mouth. He was utterly shocked, never imagining his own mother could be so terrifying and blinded by ambition. "Mom, she really did that? Hired people to kill you?" Dad nodded, voice pained. "Yes. She learned I was alive through her hitmen and wouldn't stop. I lived in terror, but now I want justice." Alexx sobbed uncontrollably, shoulders trembling. "Dad, I didn't know." "Mom, she forced me. I regret it so much." The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. I glanced around, afraid someone might recognize us. Alexx wiped his tears, voice resolute. "I'll testify in court. I'll tell everything. For justice. I can't live like this anymore." We sat there, three men with overlapping pasts, rain pattering on the window like a fateful drum. Dad patted Alex's shoulder. "Thank you, son. This isn't revenge, it's the truth." Alexx nodded, eyes red. "I'll prepare. But Mom will kill me if she finds out." I reassured him. "We'll protect you. Jake, the lawyer, will help." We quickly planned. Alexx would gather more evidence from home and we'd meet Jake to finalize the case. Leaving the cafe, the rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy. I drove Dad back to his hideout, heart full of hope. Alexx promised to call tonight. On the way home, my heart still raced, but now the evidence was enough. Elena would face justice, and my family, though broken, would find peace. Back home, I lay down, exhausted but exhilarated. The meeting had succeeded beyond expectation. Alexx from accomplice to witness. But danger still lurked. Elena might suspect. I texted Jake. "Got testimony from Alexx. We've won." He replied, "Good. Meet tomorrow." That night I slept better, dreaming of Dad's return, the company reborn. But deep down I knew the storm wasn't over. The next morning I woke early, my body aching but my mind unusually sharp. The weak winter sunlight filtered through the curtains, shining on the cluttered desk with files and the USB. I brewed coffee, sat down, and reviewed Alex's testimony from last night. He had promised to provide the original will and confess his role, coerced but still involved. "I'll testify, Matt. To make amends," he said, voice choking. I believed him, but unease lingered. Elena, she was cunning. If she suspected Alex's change of heart, she would act. I called Dad, whispering into the phone. "Dad," Alexx agreed. "But we have to move fast." Dad sighed on the other end. "Good, son. But be careful. She's dangerous." We arranged to meet Jake that afternoon to compile the evidence. The meeting at Jake's office was tense. Jake, with his thick glasses and neat suit, spread the files on the table, eyes lighting up when he heard about Alexx. "Direct testimony from her own son? This is a ticking bomb, Matt." We reviewed the USB. Emails, recordings, wire transfers to hitmen. Alexx arrived late, face pale, carrying the original will, yellowed paper with Dad's clear signature, proving Elena had altered it to exclude me. "Mom kept it in the safe. I took it while she was in a meeting," Alexx whispered, hands trembling. Jake scribbled furiously, then nodded. "That's enough." "We take it to the police. Alex's testimony plus this will make them move immediately." My heart pounded, excitement mixed with fear. This was the turning point, but also the most dangerous moment. We signed papers and Jake promised to contact the police chief, an old friend of his. Just 2 days later, everything exploded. Based on Alex's testimony and the USB evidence, police issued an arrest warrant for Elena Winslow on suspicion of arson and insurance fraud. I got the news from Jake early that morning. My heart nearly stopped. "They're heading to Winslow Logistics headquarters right now," Jake said over the phone, voice thrilled. I rushed out of the house, driving like a maniac to the old company where I once worked, where Dad had been the boss. On the way, local radio reported, "Police raid Winslow Logistics, suspected link to 4-year-old fire." My heart thundered, cold sweat breaking out. When I arrived, chaos unfolded. Police cars with flashing lights surrounded the glass high-rise. Employees gathered outside, faces panicked. Media was already there, cameras flashing, reporters jostling with microphones. Elena was arrested right at Winslow Logistics headquarters in front of employees and the press. I stood in the crowd, heart racing, witnessing the scene. She was in a board meeting, her shrill voice echoing through the glass doors. "Today we sign the new contract." Then the doors burst open. Police stormed in, led by a tall inspector with the warrant. "Elena Winslow, you are under arrest for suspected arson, murder, and insurance fraud." She froze for seconds, face ashen, then erupted in fury. She screamed, struggling as handcuffs clicked. "Are you insane? I'm innocent. This is a setup. Who's behind it? Alexx, that traitor." Her voice pierced, full of rage, hair disheveled, eyes blazing. Employees whispered, some cried, media filmed relentlessly. Images of her handcuffed and furious spread across Detroit media in hours. Front pages, viral videos on social media. Businesswoman Elena Winslow arrested, suspected of staging fire to kill husband. I stood there, heart twisting, both satisfied and pained. She had been my stepmother, hugging me, sobbing at Dad's funeral. Now what? A monster. Investigators reopened the 4-year-old fire case immediately. They collected technical evidence, financial records, and DNA from the victim at breakneck speed. I was called to the station to testify, sitting in a cold interrogation room, recounting the midnight call, the cabin, and the USB. Dad remained in hiding, but Jake assured his safety. Experts dug through old ashes, tested residual chemicals, and analyzed Elena's bank accounts. They found large transfers to hitmen, the strange men Dad had mentioned. Then the DNA results came like a bomb. The fire victim was not Malcolm Winslow, but the warehouse manager, Rick Hayes. That charred body was Rick, who sacrificed himself to save Dad. The news spread, shocking all of Detroit. "Winslow fire victim, not the owner. Deadly mistake?" Media went wild, interviewing Rick's family, public opinion turning sharply against Elena. Financial evidence and recordings clearly showed Elena staged the fire to kill her husband, claim insurance, and seize company control. Invoices for flammable chemicals under fake names, emails planning with hitmen, and her recorded voice, "He must disappear forever," all matched Alexx's testimony. She was held without bail due to the severity. I met Alexx at the station. He looked gaunt but resolute. "You did right, Matt. Even if she's my mom." We hugged, two men once stepbrothers now on the same side. Dad called daily, voice weary but hopeful. "It's almost over, son." The trial opened in Detroit 3 months later amid chilly spring. Wayne County courtroom was packed. Reporters, former Winslow employees, curious public. I sat in the front row, heart pounding, hands clenched. Elena sat in the defendant's chair, more haggard, hair prematurely gray, eyes full of hatred toward me and Alexx. The trial began with the inspector's testimony, but the climax came when the prosecutor called a surprise witness. "We call Mr. Malcolm Winslow." The doors opened. Dad walked in, limping, hair snow white, but eyes sharp. The courtroom erupted in shock, whispers rising. "The dead man return." Reporters flashed cameras. Elena screamed, "Impossible! He's dead." Dad took the witness stand, voice calm, recounting the fire night, Rick's sacrifice, and 4 years in hiding. The gallery buzzed. The judge banged the gavel for order. Alexx and I testified next. I stepped up, hands shaking, describing the midnight call, the cabin, and the USB. She, my stepmother, staged it all out of greed. Alexx followed, voice choking. "My mother forced me to join. I regret it." This is the original will. Prosecutors presented evidence. Emails, recordings, DNA. Elena lost control in court, screaming denials. "Lies. They're framing me. Alexx, you betrayed your mother." She slammed the table, tears streaming, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial ended after 5 days, the jury deliberating briefly. The verdict was announced. Elena Winslow sentenced to life without parole for the first 25 years for arson, murder, and financial fraud. She collapsed upon hearing. "No, I'm innocent." Police led her away. Those images spread across media again. Alexx received a reduced sentence, 3 years probation for full confession and cooperation. He looked at me, eyes red. "Thank you, Matt. I'll make amends." Dad and I left the courthouse in silence, knowing justice was served, but at the cost of a family's total collapse. We stepped outside, spring wind blowing, but our hearts heavy. Dad patted my shoulder. "It's over, son." But I knew the wounds remained, deep and raw. The days after the trial saw Detroit explode with news about us. "Malcolm Winslow is alive." That headline spread across newspapers, social media, and television. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse gates, cameras flashing wildly as we emerged, shouting, "Mr. Winslow, how did you survive?" Was it a conspiracy? Dad just bowed his head, gripping my hand tightly, and we pushed through the crowd without a word. The news turned him into a media centerpiece. The man who returned from the ashes, they called him, with endless analyses of the fire, Elena, and the shattered Winslow family. My phone rang nonstop, from old friends to scoop-hungry reporters, but Dad chose silence and avoided public appearances. "I don't want to live under spotlights, Matt," he said when we returned to his hideout, the small apartment on the outskirts. "Let the past rest. We need time to heal." I nodded, but unease lingered. Every time I turned on the TV and saw old images of Dad dredged up, my heart ached. Public chatter buzzed. Some sympathetic, some skeptical. Where was he hiding for 4 years? Was it staged? But Dad just smiled sadly. "They don't understand, son. Surviving can hurt more than death." Meanwhile, Winslow Logistics plunged into real crisis. The company was temporarily suspended for financial investigations. Police and tax authorities raided headquarters, rifling through records, scrutinizing every transaction. A wave of Elena's trusted staff, senior managers, the chief accountant, and executive assistants who helped run her shadow financial system, submitted resignations en masse within days. Some fled fearing probes, others lost faith after their leader's arrest. I watched them pack desks, suitcases in hand, silently filing through rain-soaked hallways, avoiding eye contact. The company teetered on bankruptcy. Partners canceled contracts. Stock value plummeted. Though family-owned, the drop was catastrophic, and employees whispered in corridors, "We're done." I returned to the old office after 4 years, footsteps heavy on the familiar marble floor, the smell of paper and coffee unchanged, but the air funeral heavy. Dad came with me the first time, hand on my shoulder, eyes filled with deep sorrow. "This was once my dream," he whispered. My heart clenched. The company he built from a small garage now on the brink, and we had to save it. The interim board, old shareholders and lawyers, appointed me temporary CEO. I sat in the chairman's chair, hands trembling as I signed papers, feeling strange yet determined. "You can do it, Matt," Dad said, eyes gleaming. Dad returned as senior advisor, guiding strategy and restoring partner trust. He didn't office daily, but worked remotely, calling old suppliers, persuading Winslow will rise again, stronger. I saw him weary, but his voice brimmed with life, discussing plans. Early meetings were tense. Partners doubted, probing the fire, Elena. "How can we trust?" one trucking boss asked. Dad answered via video, voice warm. "Because we survived the ashes. Give us a chance." Trust returned slowly. My half-brother Alex, burdened by guilt, volunteered to work unpaid. He showed up each morning, face gaunt, eyes ringed from sleeplessness. "Matt, I don't deserve a salary," he said, voice shaking. "Let me make amends." I nodded, assigning him warehouse coordinator, hands-on work running between sites, checking inventory, coordinating staff. Alex worked tirelessly, dawn to midnight, sweating under Detroit's spring sun. I saw him change. No more polished arrogance, just humility, ready to own mistakes. Once he pulled me aside in the office, voice choking. "I thought Mom was right, but now..." I see how stupid I was. Rick died because of me. I patted his shoulder. The past is gone, Alex. We rebuild together. Gradually, guilt became drive, and Alex worked as atonement for complicit emails, hidden secrets. Dad held the first staff meeting in 4 years on a sunny morning. The office packed, about 50 remaining employees, faces anxious. Dad entered the conference room limping but head high, and silence fell instantly. He stood at the podium, eyes sweeping the room, voice resonant. Winslow burned once, but what remained in the ashes was trust, and today we rebuild from that. His words sparked light, some wiped tears. He briefly shared his survival, Rick's sacrifice, and the future. We don't just ship goods, we ship hope. Together. The meeting ended in thunderous applause. I saw hope flicker in eyes. Dad hugged me afterward. Son, this is the start. Together we launched Rebuild Winslow, focusing on green logistics, electric vehicles, solar-powered warehouses, carbon reduction. We met nightly, sketching plans on blank paper. A new image, humane, sustainable, Dad said, eyes alight. I contacted hybrid truck suppliers. Alex inspected sites for solar panels. Early days were tough, tight budgets, hesitant partners, but we persisted. One afternoon, installing the first panel at the old warehouse, Dad stood watching, wind ruffling his white hair. This is the future, Matt. Not just profit, for the next generation. My heart warmed yet anxious. Would the project succeed, or would the company collapse? Media gradually praised. From Winslow family shattered to Winslow's rise from ruins. Articles lauded Dad's return, the green initiative, our overcoming. Public view shifted to admiration over pity. They're a symbol of resilience, one wrote. Reporters called, but Dad declined. Talk about the company, not me. Partners returned, praising the vision. Alex and I grew close. Tension at first, I remembered his complicit emails, but shared work taught us to let go. One late office night, Alex confessed, Matt, I was jealous of you. But now, you're like a real brother. We laughed, clapped shoulders, forming true brotherhood, sharing meals, plans, even joking about old days. Dad spent much time at the burned warehouse site. He renovated it into the Rick Hayes Memorial Center, honoring the manager who died saving him. I saw him there daily, overseeing builders planting trees around old ashes. Rick saved me, son. This will remind us of sacrifice, he said, hand on a small headstone. The center wasn't just memorial, but a safety training hub with modern fire prevention models. Dad stood there, wind blowing, eyes distant. From ashes, we learned to live. Finally, after 6 months of probes, Winslow Logistics regained operating licenses. We signed the first major post-crisis contract, green shipping for a big Michigan automaker. News spread, employees cheered in the office. Dad hugged Alex and me. We're back. Signs of true revival, from bankruptcy's edge to new hope. But I knew the journey wasn't over. Wounds still ached, but from them we grew stronger. 1 year had passed since that fateful trial, and Winslow Logistics had resumed stable operations, like a ship that had weathered a storm and now glided smoothly across Lake Michigan. Revenue gradually climbed back, not in the explosive way of old, but steadily built on the green contracts we pursued. The company wore a new face, smaller, leaner, with fewer employees, but all deeply committed. We focused on transparency, every invoice publicly audited, every decision collectively discussed. The reborn from ashes image became our slogan, printed on the new logo, a flame transforming into a green tree. I remember the year start meeting when employees applauded the financial report, eyes shining with hope. We didn't just survive, we're better, I said, voice trembling with emotion. But behind the smiles, I still felt the old pain, sleepless nights thinking of Elena, Rick, and 4 lost years. The company revived, but hearts needed time. Malcolm Winslow, my father, officially retired on an autumn morning as golden leaves fluttered outside the office window. He sat in the chairman's seat one last time, gazing around the meeting room with nostalgic eyes. "I'm old now, boys," he said, voice warm yet weary. "I'm handing full control to Matthew and Alex. I trust you'll do better than I did." We hugged him, tears streaming. Dad lived more peacefully than ever, moving to a small house by Lake Michigan, where he spent time tending garden plants, reading by the fireplace, and mending bonds with his two sons. Every weekend he called us over, cooking simple meals, grilled meat and salads from homegrown veggies. "I want to make up for the lost years," he whispered as we sat by the lake watching the fiery sunset. He taught me to plant pines, patience, son, like life. With Alex, he was gentler, listening to his guilt and advising, "The past is a lesson, not a shackle." Dad became our emotional anchor, not the boss anymore, but the true father we thought lost forever. I, Matthew, became the youngest CEO in company history at 29. Sitting in Dad's old office, gazing at Lake Michigan sparkling under the sun, I felt the weight of responsibility. I ran things calmly, ethically, lessons from Dad and our losses. No more rushed, profit-driven decisions, always considering employees, environment, and morals. Once when a partner suggested cutting corners to save costs, I refused. We don't do that. Winslow is transparent now. Employees respected me, calling me young Matt with affectionate smiles. But behind the calm, I had weak moments, like staring at the silver watch photo, recalling the fire. Then I'd drive along the lake, wind whipping my face, reminding myself, stay strong, for Dad, for Rick. Work was busy, but I found joy, seeing staff laugh during breaks, revenue rising, knowing I built something meaningful. Alex worked as operations manager, running between warehouses, checking trucks, coordinating schedules. He toiled tirelessly, dawn to dusk, sweating under Detroit's summer sun. Colleagues respected his honesty and redemptive spirit, never hiding mistakes, always owning them. "Alex, you've changed," an old employee said, clapping his shoulder. Alex just smiled sadly. "I have to, for what I caused." I saw him mature, from an ambitious kid manipulated by his mother to a man who knew regret. At lunch, he often sat alone in the office corner, staring at the lake, eyes distant. I knew he was haunted by his mother, his role in the fire. But gradually he opened up, sharing childhood stories, fatherless years, pressure from Mom. "I once thought greed was strength," he confessed one late night over post-work beers. "Now I know it's just chains." Our relationship grew close, like true brothers we never had. Awkward at first, I remembered his complicit emails, but shared work taught us to let go. We talked about the past, no resentment, just empathy for two sons scarred by adult greed. One rainy afternoon, delayed trucks due to a storm, we sat in the old warehouse sipping strong black coffee, chatting. "I used to hate you, Matt," Alex said, voice low, "because you had a real dad." I looked at him, eyes stinging, "And I hated you for following Mom." But now, we both lost. We hugged, tears falling, and from then our bond solidified. We became partners in work and life, sharing dinners, lakeside walks, even joking about old days. Alex called me Big Bro. I called him Little Brother, a new family forged from ashes. Then one chilly autumn afternoon, golden leaves scattering in Dad's garden, he received a prison letter. Sender, Elena Winslow, a short note on thin white paper. "I want to see you just once more." Dad sat holding it, hands trembling, eyes distant over the lake. "Dad, what do you think?" I asked, heart pounding. He sighed. "She's Alex's mother and was my wife. We can't run forever." After much thought, nights pacing the garden, reflecting, he decided to visit Wayne County Jail. "I'll bring you both," he said firmly. "All three of us need to face the past to close this chapter completely." My heart clenched. Meet Elena? She was a prisoner now, but memories haunted. Her shrill courtroom screams, hateful eyes. Alex paled. "Mom, I'm scared." But we agreed. For Dad. For ourselves. We drove to the jail on a foggy morning, east wind whistling through cracked windows. Wayne County Prison loomed on Detroit's outskirts. Gray concrete walls, jagged barbed wire. The air was heavy, musty as we passed checkpoints. Dad led, limping but head high. Alex and I followed, hearts drumming. The visiting room was cold. Glass partition, hard metal chairs. Elena was led in, withered beyond recognition. Prematurely gray, tangled hair, gaunt face, deep wrinkles, eyes mixing regret and bitterness. She sat, trembling hands on the phone, staring through glass. "Malcolm," she whispered, voice hoarse. She spoke first, bitterly. "Happy now, Malcolm? Seeing me like this?" Dad met her gaze, eyes sad. "No one's happy seeing this, Elena. Not me, not the boys." She bowed her head, tears streaking wrinkled cheeks. Then she confessed, voice breaking. "It all started with greed that swallowed us. I wanted the company, power. I was blind. I'm sorry, Malcolm. Sorry, Matthew and Alex, my son." She looked at Alex with choked eyes, hand raised to glass as if to touch. "I'm proud of you, Alex. You chose right. Live honestly. Don't let greed cloud your mind like it did mine." Alex wept, voice shattering. "Mom, I'll visit often. I forgive you." She nodded, sobbing. I stayed silent, heart twisting at the sight. Elena, once the fire's architect, Dad's hunter, was now just a frail old woman imprisoned by her own greed. Leaving, I spoke once, calm yet emotional. "Forgiveness doesn't erase crime, but holding hate only keeps us in pain." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Matthew." We exited, the chill clinging. On the drive back, the three of us sat in silence for a long while. Wind slipped through cracked windows, carrying autumn's rotting leaves. Dad turned, voice warm. "Sometimes justice isn't in the sentence, it's in how we choose to live after." Alex nodded, wiping tears. "Yes, sir. We choose forgiveness to live." I drove, heart lighter, the wound scabbed, scar remaining. My family finally reclaimed what seemed lost, not wealth, but truth and kindness. We lived on, rebuilding Winslow Logistics as a symbol of rebirth. Dad tended his small backyard garden. Alex and I ran the company, returning it to original values. Every evening, the three of us sat by Lake Michigan, sharing stories and laughing under the sunset. New life began from past ashes, and I knew our family was stronger than ever.